So finally, I'm going to talk about my HP Z32 or Z32, depending on where you're from. I've had this for about a year now. Now this monitor is still for sale and it's a current model, so that's why I guess this video, even though it's late, is still going to be valid. So let's talk about the specs. Now the most important spec is the size. This is a 32-inch monitor, which is quite a large monitor in my opinion, and it has a 4K resolution. My previous monitor was a 27-inch Asus monitor, which I thought was a pretty good size, but when I got this 32-inch monitor, I found that 32 inch is probably the ideal sweet spot for a 4K monitor, especially if you're on a smaller desk. So when I first got this monitor, I had a really small desk, so it wasn't very far away from me, and I found that was kind of like an ideal setup. Now, however, I've got a proper desk and the monitor now sits a little bit further away from me, and it's only now that I think maybe I could go bigger if I wanted to, but I think 32 inch still is a very nice size for most people. Recently, I experimented with a 43-inch Samsung TV as a monitor, and while that was really nice for gaming, being all big and colorful and so on, it was really bad to use as a monitor. The text was very unclear and just the colors were all wrong. So, but speaking from the point of view of size, on a desk like this, 43-inch was really nice. I could set my scaling to 100% at 4K, and the size of everything was pretty much ideal on a desk this size. So while that's good for gaming, for real work, I have to go back to my Z32. Now this is an IPS display, which means the viewing angles and the colors are excellent, and that was my primary reason for buying this, because I use it mainly for editing photos and video. So while I'm not a professional, color accuracy is quite important for me. Now I don't have any fancy tools to measure the color accuracy, but just subjectively, having used this monitor and several other monitors, I can say that this one looks pretty good in my opinion. The other spec that grabbed my attention was the contrast ratio of this monitor, which is 1300 to 1. Now most IPS monitors come with a ratio of about 1000 to 1, and you can really tell the difference between that and 1300s. The blacks are much blacker and the white parts are much whiter. You can really tell the difference. Blacks don't look like grey on this monitor, they look really black. Let's talk about the design and the looks. How a device looks could be very subjective, but for a monitor which you are literally looking at all the time, I think the looks can be quite important. This monitor has a really nice bezel arrangement. The bezel is a uniform thickness around the entire monitor, top, bottom, left and right, and it's not really like, you can't see any plastic. The bezel really consists of just a matte piece of the display extended. In fact, most people will call this a bezel-less monitor. This gives it a very balanced look, and I'm not sure why all monitors aren't made like this. I think it will be excellent. It doesn't even have the bar at the bottom. Sometimes monitors can be bezel-less on the top left and right hand side, but at the bottom you still have this big plastic bar with the brand written on it. So this monitor has none of that, and it's all the better because of it. The only thing that breaks up that symmetry is the status LED on the bottom right hand corner, and even that is quite minimal. You don't get to look at the back of your monitor very often, but this is also beautifully designed. It kind of makes me wish I used the monitor in more of like an open plan office where other people can see the back of it, or I can see the back of it from time to time. So the back of the monitor is designed kind of in two steps. So the first step houses the display itself, and that's a full 32 inch. And then in the middle, there's like another step which contains all of the electronics which runs the monitor, including the power supply. This is also where all the power cables and the display cables plug into. This enables the cables to be plugged in parallel to the display, so they're like connected from the bottom up. So they plug in like that and not like that, so they don't stick out to the back at all. On the left side of the stand is embossed a very modern looking HP logo, which has a glossy inlay. On the right hand side is a Z32 logo, but this one isn't glossy. It's kind of like has an etched appearance. You might say coarsely brushed. If you're wondering where all of the legally required information is on this monitor, HP have cleverly put it underneath the stand. So once you attach the stand to this monitor, that label is going to be hidden as well. There is a small one also underneath the bezel, which is also invisible in most use cases. Another advantage of the square design is that webcams attach very securely to the top of this monitor. There's no tripod mount yet, but one can only dream. I have my Logitech Brio attached to the top of my monitor, but I think most webcams these days come with a very similar arrangement for attaching to the monitor, and this one is particularly secure because of the square nature of the bezel. The screen on this monitor does have a matte coating. I've used this monitor adjacent to a huge bright window and also in a completely dark room, and I've never had any issues with reflections. This monitor has the usual height adjustment, and also it can swivel side to side, but it cannot rotate into portrait. I actually prefer this as I never use my monitor in portrait mode, and being locked in the way that it is, it's always perfectly horizontal. As mentioned before, there is a tiny status LED in the bottom right corner of the bezel, and this turns from orange when the monitor is in standby to white when the monitor is on. And if this is too obtrusive for you, you can even turn that off in the monitor settings. To control the on-screen display, there are 5 buttons on the back of the right-hand side of the display. The largest button on the bottom is the power button, and the 4 smaller buttons on top are soft buttons, which can change function depending on what exactly is on the OSD at that particular time. You can press any one of the smaller 4 buttons to pull up the OSD menu, at which point you will have 4 options. The top one opens the main menu and immediately goes to the brightness adjustment. Then you have the usual controls for brightness, contrast, color input, image, picture-in-picture, power menu management, and information. Brightness and contrast are self-explanatory. If you go to the color control, you have the option of selecting which color space you would like to use and also the color temperature. There are a set of preset viewing modes which you can use. The input control allows you to see which one of the inputs are active and allows you to choose between them. There is also a display port mode option. Image control allows you to select things like dynamic contrast, which I leave off, black stretch, which I also leave off. In fact, I have no idea what this is. Response time, which I leave on 5 because I do gaming on this. There is also a sharpness control, which I leave in the middle, set at 4. Picture-in-picture allows you to use 2 inputs at the same time. I leave this off because I only have 1 input. Power control allows you to select different power modes, power saver and performance. I obviously leave mine on performance. There is auto sleep that you can turn on and off. There's also power on recall. I don't know what this is. I guess it will give you the same input you had before it turned off. I don't really know. You can also adjust the sleep timer and whether you want the status LED to be active or not. You can also control aspects of the menu itself, like the position and transparency and the timeout and so on. There's the option for factory reset, and you can change a language. Finally, the last screen gives you the information on the monitor, like a serial number, firmware version. It also tells you how long the monitor has been on, which is interesting. Mine has been on for 2,500 hours, which is 105 days of continuous use, or 312 days of 8-hour working days. Now that's quite a lot, so I've really used this over the past year. Looking at the inputs now, we have one DisplayPort 1.2, one mini DisplayPort 1.2, one HDMI 2.0, and one USB Type-C, which enables you to connect and charge a laptop up to 65 watts while using it with this monitor. I've actually used this with my work laptop and it works really well and is super convenient. In daily use, I use the DisplayPort as my primary input, and I also have the USB Type-C port connected to my desktop computer, which enables the monitor to act as a hub. Now this makes it very easy to swap between my desktop and my laptop because all my peripherals plug into the monitor and then it all goes across to whichever computer I'm using with just one cable. One thing I have to note is that the position of the headphone jack is a little bit unfortunate. It is sandwiched between the DisplayPort and the USB-C port, both of which I use. It's therefore difficult to plug anything into the socket without first unplugging the USB Type-C port. We then have 2 USB Type-A ports, one of which I use to charge my desktop devices such as my mouse, keyboard and gaming headset, phone, as well as my tablet. Now let's talk about the quality of the display itself. As I said, I don't have any equipment to measure any of this, so this is all going to be really subjective. I think that The thing that stands out the most to me is the contrast ratio, which makes black look really, really black and whites look really, really bright. And this for me is essential for photo editing because you want to know how it's going to look when you print it out on proper glossy art paper. The contrast ratio looks as good to me as my friend's Samsung 32-inch monitor, which has a VA panel. In fact, I compared them side by side once and the contrast ratio looked really similar, except obviously the colors and the viewing angles on my IPS monitor were way better. As far as IPS glow is concerned, yes, of course, there is a little bit. If you're looking at a completely black screen in a dark room, you will see some glow, but it is much better than any other IPS monitor I've ever used. Viewing angles are excellent, but there is some washout as you go to extreme viewing angles. This again is quite normal and better than any I've experienced before. The brightness for me is completely accurate. As I mentioned before, I used this next to a massive open window at one point in time and it was fine. Now, as you can see, I mainly use my computer in a dark room and the brightness never needs to go up more than 30%. Now, with a maximum refresh rate of 60 Hz, this is definitely not trying to be a gaming monitor. However, I game quite regularly on this and it's absolutely fine. Perhaps it might be nice to have a monitor with a higher refresh rate, but from my research, the gaming monitors come with lower quality panels and therefore would not be usable for my primary use of photo and video editing. It does not support any kind of variable refresh rate or NVIDIA G-Sync or FreeSync or any of that. And occasionally I do see some tearing while playing, but it's nothing that affects me from my level of gaming. In conclusion, I am quite happy with my purchase of this monitor. It's definitely not a cheap monitor, but you do get what you pay for. It's a fantastic monitor in almost every way except probably for professional gaming. There are only a couple of things that I might personally change on this monitor to make it even better. First of all, it would be nice to have the headphone jack on the side of the monitor rather than on the bottom where it could actually be usable. Also, it might be nice to have some kind of built-in speaker. Even though speakers on monitors tend to be very trashy, sometimes it's better to have some sound rather than none at all. For example, if I forget to turn my Bluetooth speaker on. So that's all I can say about this monitor for now. I'm sorry I don't have any measurements to give you, so this has all been very subjective, but it's definitely one that I would recommend. So thanks for watching, and remember to check out my link below for some photography items that I have for sale if you want to show your support, if this video helped you in any way. Other than that, bye for now. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I just want to say a big thanks to all of the viewers who liked and commented on my previous video about myself. I really didn't expect it to get that amount of attention and feedback, so thanks a lot for that. I had no idea so many people would find it interesting. Great news, this video has a sponsor, me! As you may know, I'm a photographer, so I sell a couple of my prints online on my website www.vinesography.com. That link is down there below. You don't have to buy a whole print, but you can buy like a mug or a mouse pad or a phone case or something with my image on it, and I'll get a few dollars from that. So if you appreciate this video, that's a good way for you to give something back to me and for you to get something really nice for yourself as well. So if you want to support me, check out my link below. Right, let's get on with the review.